Hello and welcome back to Library Nocturne. I'm your host, Black Fairy, and thank you for joining me today. Today is going to be a quick little review of a movie that I saw recently you might have heard of called The Bride. The Bride. And yeah, it's a movie that I actually was waiting on when I first saw the trailer and I saw Christian Bale. I don't really know Jessie Buckley, sorry, but I thought it was really interesting that it was called The Bride. I was like, okay, we're getting a lot of Frankenstein content. Okay, we're breathing life into all of these like classics, all of these public domain works. And I was really excited at the prospect of, having a story about the bride. I don't know if she fulfilled it, but we're going to get into it. So like I was saying, so The Bride, it came out this year and it was directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. If you're familiar, I most know her as the sister and real life sister of Donnie Darko and Jake Gyllenhaal. And what's the other thing I saw her in? The Dark Knight. That's probably what I know her from the most because I recently saw Donnie Darko. And I thought they were fantastic acting together in that film, honestly. So I was also excited about the prospect of Jake being in the movie as well because I didn't know that. Like when it was first announced, there wasn't a whole lot of plot about it. Wasn't a whole lot of other names to me that were attached or being like advertised. So I just didn't know. So to hear he was in it, I was actually very excited for that. And honestly, I do like Christian Bale as an actor. I think, he can really go some crazy places, probably because he's crazy, but he's done some of the most impactful American cinema in the last 30 years. You know what I'm saying? So I do like his influence and his presence just kind of can't be denied at this point. Because for the longest time, I didn't even know he was British, y'all. I was like, you had me fooled. I thought he was American. American Psycho. Anybody play that to the T, I just swore you was born here. But he wasn't. He's British. Which is always interesting to me because the British actors always have such convincing like American accents, and it's because they get a lot of American TV and film and stuff like that. I just think it's interesting. That's all. He really fooled me. So I was actually excited to see him be Frankenstein's monster, Victor. And excited to see what this story was going to tell about the bride because if you guys are familiar with Ryan Coogler's podcast, Proximity Media Podcast, Maggie Gyllenhaal was actually on there recently talking to him about the movie. And something I didn't know that she laid out for everyone watching and those there was that the actual original Bride of Frankenstein movie doesn't actually have the bride in it. Except for like the last 2 minutes, and she doesn't have any lines. She just like opens her eyes and screams. Girl, I wouldn't have known that ever if she hadn't have told me that, because I'm like, she has such an iconic appearance and just like her look, the silhouette, like the one streak going up into the hair. Like if you ask anybody what the Bride of Frankenstein looks like, I'm sure most people could probably tell you. But what no one has ever told me was that she never actually spoke in the movie. And so the movie wasn't actually about her. It really should have been called like The Search for the Bride of Frankenstein, if we're going to be honest, because that's really what was like going on. So that was really interesting. And I love that such a random moment, such as seeing someone's tattoo, made her think about Bride of Frankenstein and how the bride never had any words and how the story wasn't really about her. I mean, I feel like that's how all great art almost comes about. Like it's a piece of random inspiration that makes you curious and makes you want to dig deeper and find out more about whatever it is that you're being inspired by. And so that led her to developing this movie, because it was also written by her. I believe this is the first time she's written a movie, and also the first time she's directed a movie, and then therefore the first time that she's written and directed a movie. And I will give her an A for that an attempt was made, because I know it's not easy to jump crafts like that, going from actor to director, from actor to writer. I mean, I don't know if we've ever seen it go the opposite, like a director going into an actor role, which I would be really interested to see if anybody has any examples. But I know it's not easy, so it's not to take it lightly that, you know, she had a really big undertaking. But I do think some of the choices that she made for the ride were really interesting. So we're just going to get into it. So this film is set in the 1930s. You know, a lot of films right now are bringing up their timelines. They're bringing it more into a more current era. I'm thinking even of like Interview with the Vampire, going from like 18, what was it, like it was set originally like 1830 versus now like 1910 or something like that. You know, a lot of stories are really moving it up into that last millennia, I think, to just give us a more realistic understanding of like the type of society that these stories were taking place in. It's a little hard, right, as today to see a story about Victorian England and really get immersed and understand and really, you know, have awareness of what all the social mores and therefore what the movie could be saying. Like, you know, it's just a lot there. But I feel like for a lot of us, especially in America, 1910 to 1930 is an era that we could at least imagine, we could see, we have more like evidence about. So she moved it up into a more relatively current time period, which I thought was a good idea, honestly. And even making them American, like this is not American story originally. And I do think setting it in this like New York area transatlantic moment is really interesting. Just because hearing people try to do those accents, I think is just always so funny. Let's look up, because I feel like I'm already kind of, I feel like I need to see it twice, to be completely honest, because most movies you need to see twice to really understand. And I think there was just a lot going on. I mean, anytime you're watching a movie for the first time, or I'll say I statements, anytime I'm watching a movie for the first time, it's, to me, there's always so much to catch in a movie that, like, for me, watching movies is kind of like a printer or like screen printing. With each new pass, I get more information. I get a more clear picture of like what the story is trying to say and what's being developed. And I feel like this is one where I could probably benefit for like 1 or 2 more viewings. But you know, the drive-in, and they, you know, they only keep stuff up at the drive-in for like 1 week if you're a girl movie. Girl, Black Phone was in the drive-in for like 2 months. I couldn't take it. So I only had one chance to see this in the drive-in. So, okay, this is Chicago, actually. Okay, so really the story starting off, and it starts off with her, which I think is a very good choice, right? You were trying to undo the old movie that didn't even have her in it until the last 2 minutes. So we start off with Mary Shelley, and we start off with, her name is actually Ida. And already I feel like we kind of see like the kind of world that she's living in. She's not very long for it, obviously, because she dies pretty early. And then we join Victor Frankenstein, who's looking for this Dr. Euphonius to help him find a mate, essentially, and to help bring someone back to life, which I think is an interesting distinction between actual Frankenstein, because he is a man who's put together, versus the bride just being a resurrected woman. Like, she isn't put together, she's already whole. And hey, listen, I love that kind of symbolism. She's already whole, okay? You know what I'm saying? You don't have to put anything in her but life. You know, Victor had to be made. That's a big difference. So already they actually are existing on two different planes, because in reality, Victor Frankenstein, as like the monster, that entity, that being, he actually never existed before that moment. But with the bride, we're talking about someone who already had an interiority, who already had a life, who had a mind. You know, she was already a fully formed adult. So I think that in itself, once the story develops, we see poses some challenges, right? So after they actually locate Ida, and it seemed a little random, to be honest. They were probably just looking for freshly turned graves with women whose ages didn't look too much, you know what I'm saying? Like, they saw, okay, she's probably only 25 or 30, whatever. I don't even know how old she is, but so they find her, they bring her back to the lab, they resurrect her, and then she's awake and she's going crazy because she's lost her memory, which I think is really interesting, right? Because like I said, Victor had to be put together. So in theory, he has no memory. Like, there is no memory for him to carry into his life as the monster Frankenstein. Like, there's a brain in there that comes from someone, but it doesn't come from the head that it's in. You know what I'm saying? The head doesn't come from the neck that it's on. Like, it's all of this disjointed body parts that come together that I feel like open him up to being like a baby. He's more like a baby. He's put together, he's born, he's new. Whereas Ida, because she was already just like a woman, you know, now she doesn't have her memories. We're talking about like a lost interiority now that she really wants to figure out, and it does put her in a vulnerable position to then, you know, kind of be told by Frankenstein, like, oh, actually you were my wife, you had an accident, you lost your memory, right? So now she's susceptible to anybody's narrative at this point. But something that I thought was interesting is that when she comes back, she has these like random outbursts, basically, of like, she's always doing like a brain cloud word association. Like, somebody will say something and now she's like off on these like words that sound alike, or that mean the same thing, or that, you know, whatever. And like, it's this transatlantic accent, Lord, that I swear, like, the Australians and like the British people love to try to do them a transatlantic accent, and I'd be like, okay, it's very Harley Quinn, very Margot Robbie doing Harley Quinn type beat. And you know, that is interesting, right? I think director Gyllenhaal was really intentional about the fact that the original movie, the bride didn't speak, and so she's going to make sure that the bride has something to say all the time now, pretty much. I think it's interesting that, like I said, she has these outbursts. And so I do think it was very smart and intentional on director Gyllenhaal's part to make sure that the bride was kind of always talking. She kind of like never be quiet. Which I love. You know, I love an outburst. I love a word cloud. My friends know, like, say anything, and I probably got like a song, a show, a quote, or something. So she felt very familiar and relatable to me in that way. And I just appreciated, like, right, she's a woman come back to life. Like, you talk about someone who like doesn't care, or like, what's the stakes for her? What, you're gonna kill her again? Like, no, she doesn't want that, but at the same time, it's already happened, you know? So, right, it's about them being together. It's about their relationship. I would say they're on a little bit of Bonnie and Clyde without the actual bank robbery, where they're just, you know, she's trying to get reacquainted to being alive. I feel like Frankenstein, for the first time, is actually feeling alive. You know, he has a companion. He's not just like by himself. And to me, they actually get into like a little bit of Bonnie and Clyde, where they just kind of start experiencing life, right? Now, where they getting this money from, I don't know. I don't know if Dr. Victor Frankenstein left Frankenstein some money or what, but they're just like living their life in 1930s like it's golden, right? They go to the movies, and then they see Frank's favorite actor, Ronnie Reed, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal, which I thought was so funny, actually. Having Jake Gyllenhaal be this actor who's like singing and dancing in all this big band, old style talkies, first talkies energy is really funny, actually. I think that side of his acting ability has been really underutilized, and I want to see more of it. So they need to figure that out, because he was singing and dancing, and I'm like, actually, Jake, this kind of where you belong. So they go see the movie, they go dancing, which I thought was really interesting because there is a lot of movement in this. I think a lot of times with the Frankenstein stories, right, we still have the idea of the Frankenstein like, oh, ooh, like he's really slow, he's lumbering, like, you know what I'm saying, kind of teeter-tottering, very like this energy. But this Frank is not original Frankenstein. Like, he has movement, he has a body. He actually kind of looks like when Jared Leto was the Joker to me a little bit, like with the tattoos and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, girl, so you're tatted up, you can walk around, you walking and you dancing, like, can these dead ligaments even stand all that? Like, do you have blood? What's going on? So they go see this movie. Someone comes up. People, try to harass them. Frank kills them. Now they're super on the run, right? Frank tries to get Ida to leave. Like, look, just leave. Don't come with me. But she's like, boy, anyway. So they hop on this train and they're trying to stow away. But this is the part of where, like, her outburst kind of gets them into trouble for the simple fact of, like, she's yelling. And the police find them. Naturally, you already know what happens to this policeman. Whop to him, goodbye. And so they gotta keep going, okay? So now already I didn't know this part of the story. Like, I just didn't know what the story was about. So they have these two police officers. One is played by Penelope Cruz. The other one is this other man. I don't know. Sorry to that man. But Peter Sarsgaard. No relation to Stellan, Alexander, or Bill, or Walter, or Gustav. No relation. So, they're following them. They're like, who is doing this crime? They're following the crime. Cool. So while they're in hiding, Frank gives Ida this name, Penelope. Now, we know her name is Ida, but now she thinks her name is Penelope. Frank's going to let her think her name is Penelope, mostly because he doesn't want her to remember her life, and he doesn't want her to freak out, honestly, which, I mean, I think is pretty messed up. Like, girl, you already brought her back to life. You might as well tell her the truth. But basically, they go to see another movie because I feel like I didn't realize how big movie culture and like picture show and Nickelodeon culture was at this time. It was really, I guess, like the main form of entertainment people were having besides like your speakeasies and things like that. So they go to the movies and they see The Revenge of the Zombies, LOL. And basically she has more outbursts and it just causes like a whole scene in the movies. And they're like, oh, look, there's the killers, and everybody's scared. Oh my God. So now with the police very closely chasing them, now like it's an active chase. And they run into this high-class party to hide. And they run into none other than Ronnie Reed, which is Frank's favorite actor. I feel like they have another dance break there, like a flash mob moment, like a full dance number. Like Penelope's dancing, Frank's dancing, everybody's dancing, they're singing. I thought it was really fascinating to see Christian Bale also do this because I've never seen him do a role that even at some points allowed him to be really like relaxed. I feel like he does a lot of emotionally tense roles in a lot of emotionally tense movies, but seeing him just like singing and dancing, and Jake singing and dancing, was actually really fun for me. I think they just embraced like what that was, you know, without it necessarily being like corny. And I thought that was a very delicate line to walk, but I think they played it perfectly. So after this whole dance number and the police finally catch up with them, and there's this whole confrontation, you know, the bride takes Ronnie Reed hostage. Like, look, if you don't back off, I'm going to kill him. Like, you guys love him. It's this high class party. You don't want to see his brains splattered everywhere. Back off. And what I really loved, shout out to director Gyllenhaal for this, is that she put Jake Gyllenhaal on his knees begging. And I think that is also a very good look for him. I don't feel like enough people embrace putting men on their knees and begging. Like, let's think about the animal kingdom, y'all. The men are the ones who are always trying to attract mates. They're doing their dance. They're flying around. The fish at the bottom of the ocean are making sand art and Zen gardens for the girls. Hopefully, just hoping somebody would choose them. I think we need to bring that energy back. I think everyone has lost sight of the plot that it is supposed to be men on their knees begging. Okay? Whether it's to let them live, to choose them as a mate, or whatever, the position is on their knees begging. So thank you, director Gyllenhaal, for that. So, you know, he's really scared. He's about to die. He's about to die. You know, for the bride and Frank, there's kind of like there's stakes, but in for a penny, in for a pound, I say. So the whole story is based off of this crime boss, Lupino, who, you know, Ida was originally, in a way, like escaping from. This is how partially she dies, even though she was ranting and she falls down the stairs. Like, it was partially precipitated by these goons who were trying to handle her for Lupino. She's like an outspoken woman. And, you know, I thought it was so crazy because this mob boss, he's talking to these two guys, and he's obviously meant to gross you out and freak you out, creep you out, and you just want to see him meet his grisly end through karmic means. You know, you just don't want anything good for this guy. But he's talking to one of the goons, and one of the goons is like, well, we killed her. I don't know who this chick is, but we killed her. I watched her myself. And Lupino pulled a gun out on the guy, like, so you saying like I'm a liar type B or whatever. And tell me why the goon gonna be like, oh, pew, pew, pew. Like, he started trying to play with the boss and the dude shoot him. I was like, if there was anybody not to play with, it was that man. So you played yourself. Now you sitting slumped over on this table, and your man's got to look at you and your brains on the table, and he shook. So now he has to go out and finish the job. He's looking also for Ida / Penelope / the bride. So now we have like this multifold chase going on. Very 1930s, very Tom and Jerry. And so they're going on this kind of cross-country crime spree. It gives a little bit of Natural Born Killers. They're visiting places in where Reed's movies were set. And so they end up at Niagara Falls. So this is when they get to Niagara Falls. And this is when the cop is like, your name isn't Penelope, it's Ida. I used to know you, da da da. And she's like, whatever, boy. She shoots him in the foot. And then her and Frank get away. And then they go end up at a drive-in. And this is where we get like an explanation, like a dual explanation, because the male cop is explaining to Penelope Cruz, like, here's how I actually know her. We were supposed to go in on this case, and she was like a witness, but I didn't protect her, so now she died. And he's feeling guilty because really I don't know if I would say took advantage, but maybe I will, because it's the police, and then didn't help her until then she like died. So now he's feeling all his stupid white male guilt, which I feel like he should have died, honestly. If there's anybody who shouldn't have made it out of the movie, it was him. But he gets to just bow out really gracefully, which I hate. And so then Penelope slash actually Penelope Cruz, she, as the police officer now in charge, she's going to continue looking for the bride and for Frank. And so at the same time, when this is being revealed, Frank is also revealing to the bride, like, I lied to you. I really just wanted a partner, and your name was this. And, you know, she gets really dismayed and she like leaves. And now we get to the second moment. Thank you, Director Gyllenhaal. Christian Bale on his knees begging. Listen, there's a theme here. On his knees begging. Love that. But it shook me because then he gets shot. Boom, headshot. He's gone. I was gagged. I don't know what I thought, but I didn't think that was about to happen. So, okay, cool. The bride escapes with his body. She actually still doesn't want to let him go. They go back to the original doctor's lab, like, okay, bring him back, And Dr. Euphronia says, like, I'm not bringing him back. I tried to bring my husband back, Which to me, it's just too late in the game. You done already brought this woman back. You might as well bring back Frank. This is all he was actually ever made for. So, what's your hold up, you know? So, you know, confrontation ensues. It's a shootout. The bride also dies. You know, they catch the goon, whatever. But actually, Penelope Cruz, you know, has been moved by this couple, by Frank and by the bride. And so she actually allows Dr. Euphronia to keep the bodies and kind of encourages her to bring them back to life, which she does. And by the time the movie ends, they're back to life. Their hands are moving. They hold hands, and beautiful. And then in the end credits, they show that the mob boss has been apprehended and he's about to meet his grizzly end through karmic means, just like I wanted, because women who are inspired by the bride are now like roaming the streets and they getting they get back, which I love. That particular moment actually reminded me of this movie called Born in Flames. It's from, I think, 1983. It's a really, really, really deep cut feminist film, and it is literally about groups of lesbians on their bikes with bats and whistles riding through the streets, beating up predators. Okay, like chef's kiss. You know, I haven't really seen anything in that type of energy in any movie kind of like since then. But I do think this was actually a really good moment that gave me like a call back to that. And I was like, okay, yes, Director Gyllenhaal, this is exactly what we need to see in terms of this narrative. They have their black ink tattoos, you know, because the bride's black ichor has, you know, stained her face and all that stuff. And who knows what actually happens to him, but just know it's not pretty and he not making it out alive. Love that. And then we wrap, and that's the end of the movie. And I did feel a little bit like, dang, that's it. I need a little bit more of denouement. You know, I need a little bit more of just like, you know what I'm saying? That falling action, that denouement, just, you know, walk us on home. You know what I'm saying? And close the door and put a kiss on our forehead. Like, I be appreciating that sometimes. It's not like you have to tell us what is going to happen for the rest of forever, but just a little bit more to walk us out of the world. I do feel like sometimes it's very much blue skidoo. You jump in, you jump out. And sometimes by the end of certain movies, it's like, girl, so much has happened. I kind of need you to walk me out, like just jumping me out. And now it's the black screen. We sitting in the black theater, or I'm sitting in my car because I was at the drive-in. I'm like, okay, like, you know what I do with this. But I mean, I think it was like a good time overall. I do feel like some of the story beats, I was like, okay, Director Gyllenhaal, where are we going with this? And one notable scene for me that had me like, okay, I feel like we kind of missing the point is, I think after they escape, maybe, I don't know after which escape, maybe after they escape, I can't remember at which part, maybe after they do their whole dance number and all that, or what, they actually retire to this place. I think it's like an old school or like an old gym or something like that. They're in this pool, and the bride is so moved by Frank's like care of her, I guess, and like everything that's happened, she decides she wants to service him. I'm saying that really like euphemistically right now, but like she gets on her knees, she wants to service him. And when I was watching this part, because they took a lot of pains to show like, okay, the pants unbuttoning, the top of like the region, the groin and all this other stuff, like, hello, she's undressing him. And they're really showing like his skin on the top of like his mom's pubis. Like they're really, getting very close. And I was really wondering, like, are they going to show us some like Frankenpeen? I don't know. Like, what's going on? I feel like we're living in a time right now where people are getting more bold with full frontal male nudity. So I actually would have been like gagged if they did, but it wouldn't have been so beyond the pale like it would have been probably 10 or 15 years ago if she actually did. But she didn't, which I thought was interesting, because then that made me think like, okay, are they gonna go super typical, like he's a man all the way, or are they gonna do something interesting, with this like fact that he was created, like his gender in that way, like he was put together as a man, but then just like how far did that go? And for me, like I said before, he's doing all this dancing, all this moving, he's not slow creaking bones and half deteriorated tendons. It seems like he has a lot of juice in his body. So it did make me wonder, like, how anatomically correct is he as Frankenstein's monster? Like, how far does this narrative go? Because I can't say I've ever heard anything about the original story mentioning like sexual activity or, anything that would indicate like your actual blood is pumping, right? So I did think that was a very like interesting choice, in the sense of like, okay, so where are we going with this? And so she does begin to try to like service him, and I still do think it was a little bit subversive, in the sense like he wasn't comfortable. He was like, okay, like, no, stop, I don't want this. Like, I feel like he just had no concept of it. And I did think that choice was a little flim-flam, to be honest. For me, it kind of did give very white feminist, straight feminist tea of like, oh, you feel like the most feminist thing for her to do maybe in this moment, or like the most realistic thing to do in this moment was to try to do that for him or on him. But in my opinion, the whole movie has set up how she really didn't want to be touched, especially by a man. She was really distrustful of men when she was first brought back to life, and honestly, her experiences that she had since she had been reanimated didn't do anything to change that. So I just felt like it was very weird, honestly, for that to be like the way that she would decide to like thank him, you know what I mean, or the way she decided to show her affections or whatever for him, because with no lead up, because then they do end up having like a more like sexual montage later, and I did also think that was played very straight, all pun intended, because I'm like, okay, now she's been brought back to life too. We know she has this black ichor. Like, this is one of those things where it's more of a speculative fiction versus like a sci-fi moment, because sci-fi is more about the mechanics of how something happens, whereas speculative fiction is just about what if this thing happens. It's not necessarily about the mechanics of it. And I do feel like because this is so anatomical, there is all this like real world science that goes into it before we take that leap and off the cliff into, what I'm saying, suspending our disbelief. Is like, I really kind of did wish it was more addressed, to be honest. Because then, like, they're having this whole montage. I'm like, do y'all have blood? Like, do you secrete liquids? Like, what's going on? And I felt a way because we didn't necessarily get a shot of Christian Bale on his knees in reverse trying to perform service. Although we did get two men on their knees begging moments, I feel like there should have been another one, at least to mirror the fact that director Gyllenhaal felt like the first thing the bride would want to do is that. You know what I'm saying? It just felt really unrealistic. But honestly, reading some of these stories that the girls like and all this stuff, I'm like, actually, that might be how they feel. But we're not just talking about how you feel. We're talking about symbolic representation and what makes sense for the story. And I don't know that for the bride's first time out as an actual living, breathing character with dialogue, that is like the best way to show that, or even like a realistic thing to show, especially in the 1930s. I can't imagine girls was just throwing neck all over the place in 1930s. It's always been being done, but I know like social mores change, and that kind of felt like something that's really modern that felt really out of place there, especially when there was no reciprocity about it. Like, I was like, okay, this is I don't know how I feel about this. But you know, it and like I said, it didn't even just happen straight out, so cool. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I think we could have done without this. I think it really impacted some of the strength of the narrative, in my opinion. Like, okay, would she really do this? I don't know. But overall, I think the movie was fun. I think it was interesting. I mean, everybody's kind of letting director Gyllenhaal eat them up just by trying to be the first to give her some words. Although in my research, I did see that there is another movie from 1985 starring Jennifer Beals and Sting, also called The Bride. Actually, The Bride from 1985 with Jennifer Beals doesn't even actually have the monster Frankenstein in it. It's actually about the doctor creating the bride while Frankenstein actually has escaped into the countryside. So it's really truly more about the doctor and the bride, which I don't trust. Very Pygmalion type of story looking like it's going to develop into. I haven't seen it and I don't really know much about it, but I was very surprised to see that there was another movie called The Bride, and it was in fact about Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. So she's not necessarily the first, but I do think she is the first in really endeavoring to make the story about the bride and to maybe kind of even shake up the portrayal, you know. Just her as the bride in Gyllenhaal's film, you know, she's loud, she's always talking, she always got something to say, despite it making her and Frank's life more difficult at times. And I think that is a really poignant message, because it is really inconvenient for a lot of people for women to speak regardless of what's going on and who's around and what they're saying and all that type of stuff. So I did appreciate her depiction of the bride in that way. Although I do also think that focusing still on Frank's desire to find a companion in a way still decenters the bride a little bit for me, in that sense where, like, I think a really interesting way to take that story would have been to really just follow Ida / Penelope Rogers / the bride's perspective, like POV style. I think it would have been so sick if it was like, what's a movie like The Villainess, or what was that movie, Henry Danger, right, where the whole movie is like first person. I think it would have been really interesting and a really effective technique if director Gyllenhaal would have done a little bit of first person POV from the bride's perspective, because it's like, think about it, right? She's talking and she falls upstairs, she's dead, then she's brought back to life, she wakes up in the lab. Like, I think it would have been really impactful to put us in her position and see how disoriented we would feel. How much would we trust Christian Bale and the doctor? How, you know what I mean? Like those types of things to kind of bring in some of that narrative dynamism, because otherwise, it did play a little bit straight like a love story. Actually at the end of things, like they end up together. It's actually not a tragedy in that sense. So, I think there was some more exploratory things that could have been done, some more innovation that could have been made. But as far as the movie right now, I feel like it was a good watch. It was more of a romp than I expected, to be quite honest with you. Like I said, all the running, the dancing, I'm like, girl, I ain't never seen this in no Frankenstein movie. Even in Jacob Elordi, wasn't no song and dance. They wasn't having no good time. He was walking slow. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to director Maggie Gyllenhaal on her first feature-length film that she wrote and directed. That's not easy. And I'm sure even though she has a name as an actor, I'm sure it takes a lot to get people to put their trust in you when you're pivoting into a different role, in the sense of like going from actor to writer, director. So, just big up to her for that. I think it was a very valiant effort, and I do appreciate that it exists. I mean, even though it is like an existing property, it still does feel like an original story, because like it is. So, all in all, like, it's not like, you know what I'm saying, basura, nothing like that. I just think there were some choices that she could have made that I think would have made the narrative stronger, and that would have made it a little bit more convincing, honestly. But you live some, you learn some. Is that the saying? You win some, you lose some. But honestly, you live some, you learn some. That's my new saying. Shoot. But yeah, it's just a little review. I think I feel like there's more analysis to be had, but like I said, I would love to watch it again to maybe catch some of the more finer details. But all in all, I think if you have a chance to see it, you should go see it. Pay your money, support a women directed film. Some of the beats did have me confused, because when I saw Maggie Gyllenhaal during the filming of the movie as like the director, I was like, now who is this Justin Bieber sitting around with the cast? I kept seeing the pictures like short bowl cut and hoodie, literally looking like 2013 Justin Bieber. Girl, that was Maggie Gyllenhaal. So imagine my surprise when we get a story and it's like no lesbianism in it. That was crazy. But hey, aesthetics does not equal lifestyle. Yeah. So in summation, I think it definitely could have been better. I do think it was like a little disjointed. It felt like it was flowing smoothly at one point, but then I definitely do feel like the whole kind of like B story with the cops, it just messed up a lot of the momentum, in my opinion, because I just don't think their story was as captivating, and I didn't necessarily care about their part of the cat and mouse of it all. Honestly, I think like, right, we're seeing everything that Frank and the bride is doing, and then we cut to the police, and it was like, wow, it feels like it takes out a lot of the momentum that the bride and Frank actually cultivate, like with the stuff they're doing, like with the crowd being possessed, or in the dance break, or them freaking out, like, there was just a lot of high energy. And then it would cut to Penelope Cruz and Peter Sarsgaard. I can't even think of the man's name in the movie what he plays, but they would cut to them and it would just be like them kind of on their cops eating donuts type beat. Like, okay, it was just, I just feel like there was some things about the story, plot wise, pacing, that could have been definitely improved. And maybe even in the characterization, right? Like I said, I felt like some of director Gyllenhaal's choices for the bride just felt really at odds with her message, or what it seemed like her message was anyway. I mean, first of all, I know I mentioned the Joker and Harley Quinn separately. But also Margot Robbie and Jared Leto separately. But really, I needed to just talk about them together, because that is actually what they give as a couple, is their energy. Like, they're just running around town, being misfits. They're both, you know what I'm saying, outcasts. And, you know, of course, it's not like a vat of acid or anything. But, I mean, it's resurrecting someone from death, you know what I'm saying? So I think there's a lot of parallels in those stories, honestly. So I do feel like she kind of took the Harley Quinn and Joker route for their relationship, except, I mean, I think Frank is, I won't say way better than the Joker, because I don't know him like that, right? We don't know very much about his story beyond what we see when we start in director Gyllenhaal's version of the story, right? But I will say that, you know, their energy is kind of the same. Like, he definitely had someone like made for him, and is using emotional manipulative tactics to get that. And I think that's just a really interesting parallel to draw, especially considering that she was in The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's Joker. Which I'll say, actually, I feel like Christian Bale's makeup in this also reminds me of Heath Ledger's makeup as the Joker, when they showed him with the makeup. Like, okay, let me clarify. So in The Dark Knight, there is a sequence in which Heath Ledger as the Joker doesn't have the Joker makeup on, but he still has the Joker makeup on as Heath Ledger, in the sense that he has the prosthetics on and they're painted to look realistic and to match his face. And I do feel like that's what Christian Bale looked like, except just like on a bigger scale. Like if you would have painted him green, it would have like given probably classic Frankenstein, but I do feel like they chose a very naturalistic human fleshy tone on purpose, and it was really effective. I heard he spent 6 hours every day in makeup, and I can see why, because it takes a lot of time to make something look really naturalistic when it comes to prosthetics and just like makeup in general, especially like that sort of detail, right? So back to the point of, I do feel like this story is a little bit sensationalized in that way, where maybe some of the narrative impact is taken out because there's so much focus on like the craziness and the largeness of their actions, and the like zaniness, you know what I'm saying, of it all, that maybe some of the finer points about like women's interiority and you know, women's place in society, and you know what I'm saying, identity and like subjecthood. Like, I don't know if director Gyllenhaal was thinking about all these things necessarily when she was making this movie, but I do think they just, the premise is begging the question pretty much. And I do feel like, you know, some of those choices really subverts the power that narrative could have had. Like, I think it would have been much more effective to show, right, in the topic of like the boys being on their knees, you know, what about a woman being pleasured? You know what I'm saying? Like, that is still one of the most taboo images that you can put in a movie, honestly. It's one of those things which you put in that will take the rating overly, you know what I'm saying? And now it's like NC-17, or it's just R-rated. It could have nothing else in it risque but that, and that would take it over the edge, you know. So I do think that, you know, some of those choices did drain out the strength of her narrative, and some of the pacing and the like beats definitely took away some of the momentum. You know, I just think there was just, like I said, there was just such a missed opportunity that could have really given us some real teeth into what it would be like to get into this mind of this character, and to really show a perspective that we haven't really seen. Yeah, it still felt a little male focused. All of these beats were about the men, to be honest. Like, the original of her dying was because of the mob boss. Then her being brought back was well, the mob boss and the cop, and then her being brought back was Frank, which, okay, yeah, she had the female doctor, but then really she pioneered this technique for her husband. Like, I just say a lot of things were centered on men and their decisions, and then the like fallout that the women are dealing with as a result of that. So I do think that it's unfortunate, because I know that men will see the movie and just think crazy woke nonsense, you know what I'm saying? Like, it won't even get its proper due. I don't care about men, start there, but I'm assuming she wants her film to have a wide, appreciation from like a wide audience. I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe she just accepted that this was going to be a niche film, but I feel like it's getting a lot of hate in general. Like, I saw a title that was like, this is the most evil film, and it was just stuff that's like, this is not even the most violent film I've even seen probably this year, to be honest. Like, it's just a lot of sensationalism about how bad and how how they feel like it's so empty, and I was just like, okay. I hate when it's a film like this, when it's just gonna get hate just off the fact that it is a film directed by a woman, that's about a woman, and that they're going to treat a woman as like a serious character in the narrative. I just hate that, because then to me, that can obscure the very real criticisms that someone could have of the film. And I don't want these criticisms to just be like, oh, I just hate her film, and you know what I'm saying? But it's like, okay, I appreciate a feminist take on the film. I actually think she didn't go hard enough on her feminist take for her, really trying to do her rallying in the streets, and the girls got their bats and their tattoos. I'm like, well, the whole movie should have gave that though. And I don't know that she pushed that part of it as far as it could have gone, that she probably could have gotten away with, to be honest. It felt really tame, actually. So for everybody and all the whoever's who's like, oh, she went too far, it's violent and evil, I don't think she went far enough. I actually don't think I don't think the bride was evil enough. Even herself calling herself the bride, I mean, I think for me that immediately makes me think of Quentin Tarantino, and sorry, but she's no Beatrix Kiddo. But I just felt like, would she claim the title as the bride? Like, I'm just wondering, I don't know if she made a film that convinced me, even if I didn't agree with the choices that like the bride makes. I don't know if the director made choices narratively that convinced me of that, and that could get me to suspend my own like value judgments, to be like, okay, I see how this could happen. Like, I just don't think that happened, unfortunately. And another thing that I thought was really interesting was just them actually going to a drive-in while I was at the drive-in watching it, because I know drive-ins aren't as popular anymore, even though they should be, because we're an even more car-dependent culture now here in the United States, unfortunately. Hopefully not for too much longer. But I mean, I just think they're like neat. I think they're the best, honestly. I think it's the best way to watch a movie, if I'll be honest with you. Like, I think theaters are great, and the shared energy, like in a room, like in a theater, is really intoxicating. Like, going to see Sinners in a theater was indescribable, you know what I'm saying? I really wouldn't trade that for anything. But I do think drive-ins deserve more recognition, just for the fact of they allow for a lot of autonomy in your movie watching, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can bring your own food, your drink, you can have a party. Like, it's just so much fun. And I thought it was really funny and fun that while I was at the drive-in, then there was a drive-in montage, and it was actually like the climax of the movie. So, like I said, all in all, it was a romp. I don't know if I was convinced narratively, but she's making somebody mad, so I feel like she's doing something right. But unfortunately, I do feel like some of those criticisms will drown out the very real things that I feel like, would help to have just made it a stronger story. But again, congrats to her, and just looking forward to more media that is willing to push the envelope in terms of these narratives. And if there's going to be another bride, let's take it to the max. Like, I almost don't even want to see Frankenstein in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I almost don't even want to see Frankenstein in it. Like, you got to do that really well. Like, he really can't be the center at all. Like, he really can't give me too much insight into him. No POV, no nothing. You know what I mean? So, again, I just appreciate it. And, definitely let me know your thoughts. If you've seen it, tell me what you think, or what you feel like could have been improved, or what you feel like was the best part of it. Again, thank you for joining me for another installment of Library Nocturne. My name is Black Fairy, and I do hope you'll join me again. And I hope you take care wherever you are. Ciao.